Brady Tilson wiped the sweat off his brow and adjusted his tool belt, squinting against the harsh desert sun. The military outpost on Qatar 9 was a dust bowl, and if he wasn't fixing the air filtration units, he was unclogging sand from places it had no business being. Yet, he liked it here. It was simple work, and the Human-Savvy Alliance meant he had plenty of strange company to keep things interesting. Speaking of which, a flash of blue caught his eye. Vila stood rigidly by the supply depot, her arms crossed and her posture impossibly straight. Like all Savvy, her skin was a deep cerulean, muscles coiled under sleek, toned limbs. She looked as if she were carved from stone, every movement precise and measured. If she weren't so infuriatingly serious all the time, Brady might have found her attractive. "Oi, Vila," he called out, swaggering over with his usual lopsided grin. "I thought Savvy officers were supposed to be intimidating. You look like you're waiting for a bus." Her golden eyes narrowed, but she didn't respond. Typical. The Savvy were big on stoicism, which Brady found irresistibly fun to poke at. He leaned casually against the wall, the very image of relaxed human insolence. "You know," he continued, "humans like to smile once in a while. It's good for you. You should try it. I do not see the tactical advantage in baring one's teeth without aggression," Vila replied, her voice clipped and precise. "Your customs are inefficient." Brady laughed, crossing his arms. "Yeah, maybe we should spar sometime. Loosen you up a bit." Vila's eyes widened a fraction, her jaw tightening. "You? Challenge me." "Sure," he teased, "unless you're scared you'll lose." A hush fell over the nearby soldiers who had been pretending not to listen. One of the humans choked on his drink, while a savvy warrior looked on in stunned silence. Brady glanced around, suddenly feeling the weight of his words. Wait, did he just challenge a savvy officer? Vila's back straightened even more, if that were possible. "The challenge has been made," she declared, her voice carrying across the courtyard. "I accept." "Wait, hold on." Brady tried to backtrack, but it was too late. A murmur of excitement rippled through the crowd. Vila's face was the picture of seriousness, and she wasn't about to lose face in front of her subordinates. "Prepare yourself, human," she said, her eyes blazing with newfound intensity. "We duel at sunset, in the dunes." She turned on her heel and marched away, the gathered soldiers parting to let her pass. Brady stood there, mouth slightly open, processing what just happened. A hand clapped on his shoulder. It was Dalton, one of the human security officers, grinning like a maniac. "You really know how to pick him, Brady." Brady ran a hand through his messy hair, his cheeky confidence giving way to a nervous chuckle. "I didn't think she'd actually take me seriously." "Too late now," Dalton said, slapping him on the back. "Better get ready. Savvy duels aren't just for show." Brady watched Vila's retreating figure, her powerful strides kicking up sand in her wake. He suddenly felt a lot less cocky. "Great," he muttered under his breath. "I just challenged an alien warrior to a duel. What could possibly go wrong?" The sun dipped low, casting long shadows over the dunes as the crowd gathered to watch the spectacle. Word had spread fast. Humans and savvy alike jostled for the best view, anticipation buzzing through the dry desert air. Brady stood at the edge of the makeshift arena, his heart thumping like a jackhammer. He wasn't exactly a fighter. His brawls were usually bar scuffles, solved with quick wit or a lucky punch. But here he was, about to duel a savvy officer renowned for her discipline and combat prowess. Dalton sidled up beside him, barely containing his laughter. "You look pale, Brady." "Second thoughts." Brady huffed, attempting nonchalance. "Nah, I just forgot to stretch." He glanced across the arena, catching sight of Vila. She stood with her arms folded, her blue skin gleaming in the golden light, muscles taut beneath leather-like armor. Her long black hair was tied back in a severe ponytail, not a strand out of place. She looked like she was sculpted for battle. Brady swallowed hard. He was so screwed. Vila stepped forward, her stance impossibly rigid. "Are you prepared, human?" Brady forced a grin, shrugging. "As I'll ever be." He tried to look casual, but his eyes couldn't help lingering on the confident line of her shoulders, the fierce determination in her golden gaze. A savvy commander raised his arm. "The challenge has been accepted. Honor will be served. Begin." Vila didn't hesitate. She moved with a speed that defied logic, closing the distance in the blink of an eye. Brady barely ducked in time as her fist sliced through the air, the wind from her punch whipping his hair back. "Oh, she's fast," he muttered, rolling to the side. Vila's movements were a deadly dance, precise, fluid, controlled. Brady was all clumsy improvisation, dodging and weaving like a drunk boxer. He managed to avoid her strikes, more by luck than skill, earning gasps from the audience with every near miss. His instincts kicked in, and he went on the offensive, throwing a quick jab. Vila caught his wrist mid-punch, her grip like iron. Before he could react, she flipped him over her shoulder, sending him sprawling into the sand. The crowd erupted in cheers and laughter. Brady spat out a mouthful of grit, blinking up at the alien warrior standing over him. Her expression was stoic, but her eyes gleamed with something else. Curiosity, maybe. Amusement. "You fight." "Unconventionally," she noted, tilting her head. Brady grinned through the dust on his face. "Yeah, well, it's a human thing. Adapt and improvise." He suddenly twisted, sweeping her legs out from under her. Vila's eyes widened as she fell backward, landing with a soft thud. The crowd went silent. Nobody had expected Brady to land a hit, much less bring Vila to the ground. Even Vila seemed stunned, staring up at him with a look of disbelief. Brady scrambled to his feet, offering a hand. "Didn't see that coming, did ya?" Her golden eyes narrowed. But instead of accepting his help, she hooked her leg around his ankle, pulling him down on top of her. Brady fell forward, their faces inches apart, his hands braced on either side of her head. Time seemed to freeze. Vila's breathing was steady, her chest rising and falling beneath him. Her skin was impossibly smooth, her features sharp and captivating. Brady's heart thudded as her eyes searched his face, her expression flickering between confusion and intrigue. He expected anger or embarrassment, but Vila's lips parted, and her gaze dropped to his mouth for just a second before she caught herself, her jaw clenching. She shoved him off, springing to her feet in one fluid motion. "This duel is incomplete," she declared, her voice unusually firm. "We will continue, in private." Before Brady could process that, she turned on her heel and stalked off, her ponytail swinging with every determined step. The audience exploded into murmurs, speculation running wild. Brady sat in the sand, still dazed. Dalton helped him up, his face a mixture of awe and disbelief. "She wants a private rematch." "With you?" Brady's heart raced, his cheeky grin returning. Guess she wasn't ready to admit defeat. Dalton shook his head. "You have no idea what you've gotten yourself into." Brady watched Vila's retreating figure, curiosity and excitement swirling within him. No, he had no idea. But he was definitely looking forward to finding out. Brady stood outside Vila's quarters, his pulse pounding in his ears. He half expected her to ambush him the moment the door slid open. But when it did, she stood calmly inside, her posture perfect, arms crossed. Her living space was as meticulously arranged as he'd imagined. Every piece of armor polished and displayed, not a speck of dust anywhere. The starkness was almost intimidating, a sharp contrast to the chaotic clutter of his own tent. Vila's golden eyes locked onto his, and Brady was reminded of a predator sizing up prey. He felt a shiver run down his spine, his heart thumping a little harder than he cared to admit. "You came," she said, as if surprised by his presence. "You invited me." He shot back, leaning casually against the doorframe. "Would have been rude not to." Her lips tightened, but she gave a short nod. "We have unfinished business." She stepped closer, her gaze intense. I was distracted earlier. You fight in an undisciplined manner. It is confusing. Brady grinned. That's called style. Her brow furrowed. Style. He laughed, the tension easing just a little. Yeah. You don't always have to follow the rules, you know. Sometimes improvisation works better. He shrugged. That's how I beat you. Vila's eyes narrowed, a spark of frustration flashing in them. You did not defeat me, she corrected, her voice low and firm. You distracted me. She took another step, now standing so close he could feel her body heat. I demand a rematch. No audience this time. Brady's heart skipped a beat. Right now. Yes. Now. She moved so quickly he didn't have time to react. Her fingers curled into the fabric of his shirt, pulling him forward with surprising strength. Brady's back hit the wall, his breath catching as Vila's face hovered inches from his, her eyes studying his features with fierce concentration. Your anatomy is strange, she murmured, her fingers spreading across his chest. Humans are softer. Brady's pulse quickened, his cocky grin faltering. Well, I'll take that as a compliment. She ignored his attempt at humor, her hands drifting lower, exploring the contours of his torso. Your musculature is illogical. How you fight effectively without reinforced plating. He chuckled, his body tensing under her touch. We make do. He swallowed hard, realizing she wasn't just studying him. She was genuinely curious. Her fingers curled into his shirt again, and with one sharp pull, the fabric tore, buttons scattering across the floor. Hey! He yelped, but Vila's eyes were fixed on his bare chest, her pupils dilating slightly. You rely on agility, she said, almost to herself, and distraction. Her hands pressed against his skin, warm and shockingly soft. Brady's breath hitched, heat pooling in his gut. This is a strange strategy, she continued, her touch lingering, but effective. Her eyes flicked up, meeting his. I must understand it. Brady's throat went dry. He was acutely aware of how close she was, her scent a heady mix of something exotic and metallic. He swallowed, his usual bravado wavering. This how you always prepare for battle? She hesitated, her expression shifting. Uncertainty flickered across her face, quickly masked by determination. This is necessary research. Brady's heart thudded. He should have been laughing, teasing her for her awkwardness. But instead, all he could think about was the heat radiating from her, the intensity of her gaze. Her fingers continued their exploration, tracing lines over his abs, sending shivers down his spine. He tried to regain control, leaning in just enough for his breath to ghost across her cheek. You sure this is about a rematch? Vila's eyes widened, a faint blush creeping over her blue skin. For the first time, her composure cracked, a hint of vulnerability showing through. I do not understand this reaction. Her fingers tightened, her body tensing. Your presence is distracting. Brady's grin returned, softer this time. Guess that makes us even. He reached up, his fingers gently brushing a strand of hair from her face. Her breath caught, and her resolve wavered, her golden eyes locked on his. In that moment, the line between combat and curiosity shattered. Vila's lips parted, and Brady closed the distance, his mouth capturing hers in a fierce, unexpected kiss. Vila froze, her body rigid against his. Then she responded, her grip tightening as her lips moved with his, cautious at first, then hungry, desperate. Her uncertainty melted away, replaced by raw intensity. Brady's hands found her waist, fingers pressing into her curves as he pulled her closer, their bodies flush. Vila's resolve crumbled, her arms wrapping around his neck, her control slipping. It was messy, breathless, electric. The rematch had begun, and this time, neither was backing down. Vila's body was warm and solid beneath his hands, her muscles tense and trembling. Brady's pulse raced as he deepened the kiss, his fingers tracing the curve of her waist, pulling her closer. She responded with a hunger that surprised him, her grip on his shoulders firm, almost bruising. Vila was a force of nature, intense, unyielding, and breathtakingly vulnerable. She pressed him back against the wall, her body molding to his, her kisses urgent, searching. His hand slid up her back, feeling the intricate leather straps of her uniform, the softness of her hair where it fell loose. Vila shivered under his touch, her breath hitching as his lips found her neck, exploring the delicate line of her jaw. Her golden eyes were wide, conflicted. "I do not understand this," she murmured, her voice trembling. "My body reacts, but this is not combat. This is surrender." Brady cupped her face gently, his thumb brushing over her cheek. "Not everything's a battle, Vila." His eyes softened. "Sometimes you just feel." Her gaze wavered, vulnerability flickering beneath the intensity. Vila's walls were crumbling, her guarded demeanor unraveling as she let herself be pulled into the unfamiliar sensation. She didn't resist as Brady's lips met hers again, softer this time, coaxing. She made a small, helpless sound, her hands curling into his hair as she leaned into him, her body pressing desperately against his. Brady's heart pounded as he lifted her, her legs wrapping instinctively around his waist. He carried her to the narrow cot against the wall, his mouth never leaving hers. They tumbled onto the mattress, limbs tangled, breath mingling. Vila's movements were uncharacteristically clumsy, hesitant. Brady slowed his pace, his touch gentle as he traced the contours of her shoulders, her collarbone, his lips brushing over her sensitive skin. Their bodies moved together, a rhythm building between them, hesitant and tender, then urgent and consuming. Vila's nails raked down his back, her gasps turning to cries as she lost herself in the feeling, her pride and discipline forgotten. It was over too quickly, the intensity leaving them breathless, trembling, tangled together on the narrow cot. Vila's chest rose and fell against his, her arms wrapped tightly around him, her face buried in his shoulder. She was shaking, her composure shattered, her breathing uneven. Brady stroked her hair, his touch soothing, protective. He didn't speak, letting her catch her breath, letting her process the emotions swirling inside her. She clung to him, her grip slowly loosening as she relaxed, her body softening against his. Minutes passed, the silence warm and comfortable. Vila's eyes finally opened, her golden gaze searching his face, confusion and wonder mingling in her expression. "This feeling," she whispered, her voice fragile. "It is overwhelming." Brady smiled softly, pressing a gentle kiss to her forehead. "Yeah, it is." His voice softened. "You'll get used to it." Vila's lips curved into a faint smile, her head resting against his chest. "Perhaps," she admitted, her eyes fluttering shut. "Perhaps I do." Brady lingered for a while, his fingers trailing softly along her spine, her breathing evening out as sleep overtook her. He disentangled himself carefully, tucking the blanket around her. He slipped out of her quarters quietly, the door hissing shut behind him. The hallway was deserted, or so he thought. "Oi, Tilson," a voice echoed from around the corner, followed by a whistle. "Heard you went in for a rematch. How'd it go?" Brady turned to find a group of human soldiers leaning against the wall, grinning like fools. One of them folded his arms, his eyes twinkling. "Didn't think you had it in you to take on one of those savvy officers, but looks like you did more than hold your own." Another snorted, elbowing his friend. "He didn't just hold his own. By the look of him, he came out on top." Brady's shirt was torn, his hair a mess, and there was a very distinct bite mark on his shoulder. He grinned, running a hand through his hair. "Yeah, she was tough," he drawled. "But I think I'm getting the hang of her style." The soldiers burst into laughter, one of them wiping a tear from his eye. "You think there'll be more private rematches?" Brady's grin widened, his eyes glinting mischievously. "Oh, I'd say that's a safe bet." He shrugged, sauntering past them. "You know how it is, practice makes perfect." He walked away, their laughter echoing down the corridor. But as he rounded the corner, his expression softened, his thoughts drifting back to Vila, her vulnerability, her fierce curiosity, her surprising tenderness. Yeah, there would definitely be more rematches, and Brady had a feeling he'd be the one learning the most.